want to simplify it, yes.
Yeah, see, so no matter what we have to say in the form of evidence is not even worthy of your consideration because you don't think the question is worth asking.
I'm going to say no to that one because I would say that if you give me
But
enough,
you just
hold
said,
on, can you let me finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you give me enough information or evidence to begin to form the question and actually think that it's a feasible possibility worth testing, I would be more than happy to entertain the idea of there being a God. On a daily basis, of course, coming to these things, I always reweigh that possibility and whether or not it's worth forming a hypothesis where, and I think someone asked about this, where like what would be enough evidence for me to believe, or what would be enough for me to believe it's truly the holy word of God. I can't answer that question, so I can't test the hypothesis.
So my point is, at this time, based on your experience, there's not enough credible, even evidence out there to even warrant the question of God's existence.
Absolutely.
And so, again, what evidence could we give you that you would consider? Would you be bound only by empirical evidence since you came to me from a scientific background? Is that the only evidence you'll consider?
I pretty much require empirical, rational, logical. And I'll be real careful to say empirical because we defined empirical with the 5 senses earlier. I'm a molecular microbiologist. What I study is the tiny things that make up the invisible things. So empirical, in my word, is a whole other thing.
There's also observable evidence that those so-called invisible things are there, right?
Yes.
As they affect other things,
yes.
Right? So you're reasoning from an invisible thing based on evidence how it affects other things. You're using your mind to reason that that other thing exists.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we're doing with God.
And
we're looking at the creation as a whole and trying to find the truth about the origin of all that exists.
And I'm very open to that.
And that's what we're saying implies God. That's the reasonable explanation for what exists. Now, back to this. Are you trying to say that there is a possibility other than birth or transformation for evolutionary process to work?
I would say that to say a human was born of apes implies sudden evolution. And I think that sort of negates the necessary understanding of evolution to argue that. Okay,
now stop right there. You're saying that it's not by birth. That's not sufficient to explain evolution.
You're not literally going to pop out a new species.
Okay, so you're saying it's not going to happen by one non-human giving birth to a human.
But I'm also saying that that step's not necessary.
But you are
I'll
saying
give you that, yes.
You're saying that it's not by birth.
Yeah.
A non-human giving birth to a human. Then the other possibility is by transformation. A non-human transforms into a human.
Okay.
Is that's enough? Now
I will absolutely say a non-human is not going to transform into a human.
Okay. So it's not by birth. It's not by transformation. Is there a third possibility?
I guess if you're going to define birth by birth the way you have, yes.
What's the third possibility?
Microevolution that leads to macroevolution.
No, microevolution is change within species. You cannot redefine the term.
All microevolution is a unit of macroevolution. It will lead to macroevolution based on the relocation of a species to a new niche in which those microevolutions allow for better adaptation over time, where eventually the original species and the new species will be so divergent that they'll have reproductive barriers.
So
you have a gross misunderstanding of macroevolution.
Let me understand. This is your process. Microevolution, change within species, is going to burst forth into macroevolution into a new species. To sum up what you just said.
I don't think it's fair to sum it up that way.
Well, where did I get it wrong?
I don't think it's fair to sum it up any shorter than I have. Evolution would take you a good semester in college to understand.
I've done quite a bit of study on the subject myself.
Okay.
And I understand microevolution and I understand macroevolution, but I don't understand how you're crossing the lines to go from micro to macro. Now, explain that, how it comes from micro, change within species, to macro, change into another species. What is that process? Is there birth? Is it by birth? No. Is it by transformation? No.
It's continued microevolution. If
Okay,
you separate
but-
the species,
okay, see-
then eventually microevolution is enough steps to
This is the
recreate
same-
or to
this-
create a new species.
Right, this is the same approach that Anthony Flew took, that there's a gray area that takes millions of years, and eventually, over a process of time, we're going to end up, what, with a new species, right?
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, at some point during this long process of time, you're going to have to cross the threshold from non-human to human.
Yeah.
Now that's either by birth, a non-human gives birth, or transformation, a non-human becomes human. At some point in your process of time, that transition has to take place from non-human to human. And you deny both of the possible ways that I can
And I've said that if you want to boil it down the way you had, that humans are not born of apes, then yes, that's not true. But if you state it as the way you have just stated it, and consider that itself as humans are born of apes, then that step is acceptable.
So you're going to say that there's a non-human that gave birth to a human. That's your position.
Well, you're simplifying a statement that's much more complex than that.
No, it's not. Somewhere
Yes, it is.
along the evolutionary ladder, you got to go from a rung that's non-human to a rung that is human. And there's two possibilities. Birth, now you're fudging on it's not by birth. You're saying, well, it's got to be that way now. Now, you're going to affirm, being a microbiologist, that a non-human can give birth to a human. That's what you have to affirm as a microbiologist. So you're affirming a non-human can give birth to a human.
Given the restriction on the complexity that you've necessitated,
So at some
yes.
point in the evolutionary chain of events, a non-human gave birth to a human.
If you want to dumb it down, yes.
That's not dumbing it down.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
that's not dumbing it down.
No,
That's just
you are
getting it-
insisting that I dumb it down to level of simplicity that will make it
That's
sound
not
much
dumbing it
less
down.
intelligent than it is, and much less of a possibility than it is.
But anyway, here's the deal. I got what I wanted. I got what I wanted.
Okay.
You've accepted the possibility that a non-human can give birth to a human.
Okay.
And that's evolution. Okay? And that flies in the face of biology, laws, and...
Well, evolution allows for biology.
James, did you have a comment on... No, come up here to the microphone. You raise your hand. I assume you have something to say regarding what we're talking about. And I don't think I think we've exhausted this part of our conversation. I think we've exhausted this part of the conversation. We'll come back to you in just a minute. Yeah.
Why do all the gray areas disappear? We can look through fossil record. Fossils are real things. They're saved everywhere. Why are the gray areas not only from humans, but everywhere, all missing? How did the fish evolving into the lizard to crawl on land? How did its undeveloped extra limb give it any kind of advantage when it didn't operate in its environment that it would evolve and appropriate in sufficient manner so that it would be spread and flourished? Simple questions. Simple questions that there is no answer for. There is absolutely no evidence for.
Are you talking about transition fossils, transition
Exactly.
fossils? So you're talking about the lack of evidence of transition fossils?
Where are any of the gray areas that you speak of? There has to be facts to support the theories.
Just real quick, I'd recommend you visit the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and there's a nice exhibit downstairs that will fill in your gray areas.
Who's next? Go ahead. David, did you want to come back up and say something?
I just wanted to ask what the definition of birth was.
Yes, that's a good question. What is the definition of birth?
In this case, I assume we're indicating that one animal creates an offspring based
Offspring.
on itself.
So it would be a literal, non-human giving literal birth to a human.
Based on what we're talking about, yeah.
Okay. You're next.
Follow this. This is going to be difficult. Good afternoon, not so much morning anymore. My name is Brian. I'm part of the group that's here with Sam Houston. First thing I want to do is answer a question that I can't remember. I apologize, I can't remember who asked this. But somebody asked the question of why is the secular community so upset about religion and about what was it, the metaphysics? Why are we so upset and against creationism? The answer to that, at least in my opinion, and we all have very, very different opinions on this, is that you guys have all admitted that the creationism is metaphysics. It's not science. It's not based on science. You guys have stood up there and admitted that. And through the course of, I work in education, and the religious community has continuously attacked the scientific basis and is trying to require non-science to be part of the science curriculum. That's where we become offended. If we wanted to teach, at least in my personal opinion, if we wanted to teach creationism in a social studies class in that environment, I'm okay with that.